Hey, Pharmacy Podcast Nation. It's an exciting day. I get an opportunity to talk to somebody that I've really admired as a content developer and pharmacist himself, Dr. William Amarquaye. I am excited to talk with you today. We have something really special to review, but before we do, just say hi to the Pharmacy Podcast Nation. If you haven't heard of this guy, you've got to check out his YouTube channel, and it's is it Ghanaboy Pharm.D?
Yeah, it's under Ghanaboy Pharmd.
Yes, yes, Ghanaboy Pharm.D. It will be in the show notes, definitely. But tell us about yourself. I'm excited about this.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Thank you, Todd, for having me on. Really admire your work and what you're doing for the pharmacy profession. So I'm humbled that you would even have me on your podcast. So once again, thank you so much. Um,
This platform is about you. It's about honoring pharmacists. You got to remember, I'm just a fan. I'm a pharmacist's greatest fan. I always look up to you guys and gals and what you're doing out there. We just had Miss America on, and she's
yeah, I
going to
heard
be
about.
a pharmacist, and you are creating this content. So, um, give us a little bit of your background, and then we have to talk about the Pharmacist movie.
Yeah, definitely. So my name is William Amarquaye, and currently I am a practicing pharmacist in Florida. And my dad actually is a pharmacist. So I got the inspiration to become a pharmacist from him. Growing up, I would see him practice pharmacy and see how much his patients loved him. So I was like, there's more to pharmacy than the guy, standing behind the counter and filling pills. So it, piqued my interest in it. And I went to the University of South Florida in Tampa, and I graduated in 2017. And currently, my main practice right now is in hospital pharmacy. So I'm super excited about the pharmacy profession as a whole, and definitely, can't wait to see what my career holds for me.
That's great. I really enjoy how creative your content is. When did you start getting into content development, and what kind of inspires you to keep it going?
To be honest, I never really thought about content development, but I'm seeing the way technology is moving, and the way content developing is really going. And I was like, I can really get into this and provide education in the pharmacy realm, because I felt especially on YouTube, I didn't see as much pharmacy content. So I was like, let me add one more face in the YouTube world. So I really enjoy creating content and educational content in regards to pharmacy, because I'm very passionate about this field, and I hope I can inspire people with my content and the education that I bring. So
You
mainly, my biggest inspiration was my brother, and what he deals with on a daily basis. Because I talk about pharmacy and I talk about pain management and stuff on my channel. So he was one of the inspirations as well to start my channel.
Is he a pharmacist too?
No, he's not a pharmacist. He's a manager over at Tijuana Flats. Yeah.
So I like the lead in what you were saying about pain management, because the Netflix movie that we're going to series, it's a 4-part series that we're going to review
Yeah.
today. Not only is it inspiring and impactful, it made me cry. I'll admit it. I don't give a crap. It was very touching, but
Yeah.
it really showed how one pharmacist could make a national difference and impact on something so ravishing and destructive as the
Right.
epidemic. And part of that is the pain management truths, and that is physicians being truthful as to treating pain versus just trying to make money off of it.
Right.
I I was just blown away by the documentary, and bravo to Netflix for taking the time to invest in this story. Came out on February 5th.
Mm.
It's based on a pharmacist named Dan Schneider, and he was living in St. Bernard Parish, Louisiana,
Mm.
and he lost his son to a I guess, a drug deal gone bad. It
Yeah.
per se. And but give me your thoughts in the beginning. The first of the four was called Justice for Danny, and that's
Yeah.
kind of broken up into four places. So give me what you felt about the first part.
Man, the first part was it was hard to watch, really, because it was just seeing, because I'm a father myself, so I can't imagine, his pain in losing a son that way. And you never want to lose, your son or daughter that way. It was really tragic. And just watching the first part and watching how everything unfolded. And I think even in one point, after the son died, I think they were saying that as a family they were thinking about committing suicide.
Right.
And that really hurt me. I was like, man, it's really sad. And there was some parts where I had to like pause it and go do something else and come back, because it was just that first part was truly truly tragic. And I really felt for him because um, you never want to go through that, and especially as we'll get further into it, what this doctor was doing in this community. It was just ravishing people and ravishing lives, and it was really sad, watching that first part.
Yes. The same for me. I watched it. I had heard about it coming out maybe about 3 or 4 months ago. So
Mhm.
obviously, as a fan of of pharmacists all across the country as well as the world, I was interested in hearing from Dan and what he had to say. I thought it was going to be a little bit more specific about the opioid epidemic, but they really rolled in and kicked off a gripping story, as
Right,
you pointed out, because of him being a dad first. He's a dad first. He was a pharmacist second, and he was a community
right,
advocate third. And
right.
that, I have four daughters, so if losing a daughter, no matter what it was, let alone being murdered, that would take it to a whole nother level.
Yeah, and it was sad. I think even during the first part, the police officers were just, dismissing the case like, oh, your son was just a drug addict, a crackhead. And imagine that as your father, as being a father, hearing, someone say that about your child. And I thought that, whenever we deal with topics of addiction and stuff like that, we really have to be compassionate, because people are really suffering with this disease, and it's ravishing so many lives. So it's just sad that that situation happened.
I had the honor of being director of strategy for a company called New Season for 3.5 years that focused on opioid usage disorder treatment, and they had 87 centers throughout the country. The territories that I traveled in, I would meet with pharmacists to really dig into OUD and
Mhm.
understanding multi multi diseases, chronic diseases happening at the same time, and how cascading prescribing became an issue, including the opioids themselves, and how there, without a pharmacist to kind of oversee some of this treatment, it can really go bad, or it can just be a crutch for a patient for the rest of their lives, being on some kind of medication assisted treatment where they never get off, they just stay on. Episode 2 of this series was called A Mission from God, and it really started to take us from the family and Dan and his wife being impacted by the death of their son, and now our pharmacist becomes passionate about this mission to find
Right,
his son's killer.
right,
um, and there was a cliffhanger, or actually an impact, that we find out in this story that blew me away. And it was when Dan was interviewing so many people using a tape recorder, and
right,
he started getting very obsessive with it, and he met several people by going into um, the Ninth Ward, and
right,
which was a plighted area,
right,
predominantly black. And another point of this is the fact of how that black community was completely written off by
Mm.
its its leadership and community leadership, uh,
Right.
from a government perspective, as well as always the assumption that these people weren't worth saving as a community. And within that, we met a character named Jeffrey Hall, who his character, and he's not an actor. This is real. I mean, this is a documentary. But I personally, I don't know how you felt about this, but I kind of really liked Jeffrey because he seemed like he wanted to help. So before we, and by the way, there's spoilers in this, so if you haven't seen it yet, don't listen to us. Um, but give me, before we kind of talk about that big smack in the face,
Yeah.
what do you think of Jeffrey?
Man, it's crazy because when Jeffrey first came on the scene, I really thought that he was trying to help because he saw Dan and he saw his plight and he saw how he lost his son. So in the beginning, how he was cooperating and how he was talking with him and providing information and just listening to his backstory and the stuff he had to deal with growing up as well. And just as you were saying, that parish, that community, that plight, that economic despair, and all the despair that was happening in that community. But yeah, at first, before we got hit with the smackdown of with Jeffrey, I really thought he was trying to help. I thought he was a good guy, really trying to get to the bottom of what happened in that community. But as we'll talk about, it kind of shifted toward something else with his character.
Yeah, he gave a name, or actually, he kind of gave not a direct name, but he gave a person in the community that was a dealer too.
Right, right.
And then Dan kind of followed up with it. And when he followed up with it through the investigative team, who kept dismissing him and kept blowing him off, weren't taking him seriously yet, even though he was getting into the community started recognizing what he was doing. And there was a lot of like reference to keeping quiet and never to tell on anyone, otherwise you end up dead yourself,
Yeah.
because that's an entire economy down there. That was kind of the way that people fed their families. And that's an aspect. When I was in the world of opioid usage disorder, i I had stigmas before entering that job, and 3.5 years later, I'm a different person. 2016, I started, and I just quit so I could put my full time into the Pharmacy Podcast Network and a buying group that I'm an advisor on. Um, but when I came out of that, I was different. I looked at the disease of opioid usage disorder different. I looked at drug dealers different. Um, Now, don't get me wrong. There's scumbags out there who just
Yeah.
don't feel like they have a heart. But I met a lot of drug dealers that went to church, that supported their communities, that didn't use themselves, that treated it as a business, even though they even had jail time. Who, when you listen to their stories, you become less judgmental because you're just like, it's not right, and you're helping to perpetuate and destroy lives. But I
Right. And it's interesting you say that because when we go into Dr. Cleggett, some of her story as to and some of the motivations as to why she was doing what she was doing, it's interesting that you say that.
Yeah, Dr. Claggett, she started out being a true physician and caring
She was a
about,
pediatrician, I believe. Yeah.
and then she got caught up in not only the the huge amounts of money that she was making, which I still don't get, her lifestyle and her apartment and her house,
Right. Right.
where all that money was going. Maybe she was part of a bigger syndicate that they really didn't.
Yeah.
But not only that, she became addicted herself,
Yeah.
and um, that that's a recipe for absolute disaster. So,
Right.
you want to tell everybody what happened with Jeffrey, or what?
Well, spoiler alert: Jeffrey was the one who unfortunately killed his son. And it was brought about by, I think, another witness, Shane, I think it was, who was also in that community.
Yeah, I can't remember her name.
I think it was Shane. But yeah, she came forward, and she was a witness, to the event that happened, and she ended up, divulging that it was actually Jeffrey who, did it.
Well, actually, she wasn't going to initially
Right, right,
come up. It was
right,
it was Dan once again going from
right, right.
interviews in the community to doing phone pounding where he
Well, yeah, he actually called.
hey, and he got her on the phone.
Right.
Once again, you could tell by her nature she had a good heart. And
Mhm.
as soon as he began talking to her, you could see in her facial expression during the interview that she had to help him, even though she knew that it was going to mean changes for herself, which she was threatened. She was threatened to be killed. Her family was harassed. She actually had to move away.
Yeah,
Um, and she knew that, and she even mentioned being called by God to, to come forth and help this man kind of solve all this. And it was something that was unfortunate for her and her life and the community that she lived in. But, thank God for her because it really helped to kind of unravel some things.
yeah, and I think there was even a moment where I think in that parish, a pastor had come out and helped Danny walk around the community, because I think there was a bounty for him, because he kept on going in that community, and they were like, what is this white guy, doing in this community? And I think there was a bounty put on him at one point. And I was like, man, this pharmacist is so determined, and is so, wanting to not have this, ravage the community, and really trying to get justice, for his son, as any father would do.
So now we get to episode 3. It's called Dope Dealers with White Lab Coats. This is my favorite of the 3 because it got me away from the emotion and the tears that I kind of took on in episode 1 and was still feeling pretty depressed episode 2. Episode 3 kind of gave me more of the analytics of everything and unraveled the kind of the business side of this. And
Right.
we met a gentleman who, once again, I can't remember his name, but he worked for Purdue as a drug rep.
Yeah, he was a sales rep. Yeah.
And he basically is the he's the person that really gave us understanding of how Purdue has impacted the opioid epidemic at monumental scales that I didn't understand, even though I was in the industry of treatment.
Mm.
And I heard about Purdue, and I knew that there were lawsuits, and I knew that there were state lawsuits and county lawsuits, and there still are, and they filed bankruptcy. I didn't realize how purposeful it was to continue to get the Oxycontins into the communities.
Yeah, it's crazy, because I think the sales rep was saying that they would go look at doctors and convert the short acting to the long acting. And then he also talked about how, some of the sales rep were in bed with Dr. Cleggett, the pill mill doctor. And it just showed me the illicit nature of what's going on, because who knows how many more sales reps were in bed with pill mill doctors trying to get this out to the community. And then that just led to more diversion, and more of the drugs being sold. And it's crazy. It really opened my eyes when that sales rep said that, because I think there was one sales rep who was in bed with Dr. Cleggett, and he was making upwards to like $800,000
Right.
when he was saying. So that kind of shocked me. I was like, man, who knows how many more sales reps were doing this? And it's very, very interesting. I like that they brought the sales rep, because it showed, the inner workings of what Purdue was doing during that time. So I found that very interesting. I'm glad that they brought that sales rep in, because it really showed us insight as to what's going on.
I think it also showed the human side of how someone like that sales guy. I've been in sales since '96. So
Mm.
in '96, I entered the telecom industry, and I worked for Sprint Business, the Pittsburgh district, where I'd go to small businesses and convert their long distance and their so-called internet. It wasn't called internet back then. It was called frame relay. And I did that for 8 years, and it was horribly boring, terribly boring. And I did so well at it that I started doing things cookie cutter. Towards the last 2 years, I was making great money. And this is during the dot-com gold rush, where everybody thought the internet was going to make everybody bazillionaires. And I started cookie cutting proposals. I started doing less customization. I started listening less. And I just started doing things because I knew the more that I did, the more money I'd make. So someone who's been in sales my entire life in business development and marketing, and I I actually got that guy. Like, I understood that guy. Even though me schlepping internet connectivity and long distance wasn't a crime, but if I would have started making hundreds of thousands of dollars per quarter at something, I can see how you get caught up in that. Just like
Oh,
being
yeah.
to the drug itself, you can become addicted in your success and in money, where you start overlooking what effects it has on others, your community, the industry that you're in. And this guy he was brave enough to come clean, because what's his life like now? You know what I mean? He's got to
Yeah.
live. How many people died just in his district that was based on his participation in the whole scandal?
Right. Yeah, it's crazy what was going on, and the perspective that the sales rep was bringing. And I think that this documentary really showed me the things I've been saying, especially on my channel, about the opioid epidemic, and it really highlighted the illicit nature of what was going on. Because um, we had a lot of the interviewers who were in that talk about the amount of diversion that was happening, the amount of from Dr. Cleggett, and the pills that they were selling, like $50, $75 or something like that. And when they even raided her office, you would see stack of prescriptions
Yep.
with the same dosages, I think, for Xanax, Soma, and OxyContin, and it was just awaiting a name and a date. So, that shows me that she wasn't really evaluating pain patients. She was just writing and making money herself, because I think she deposited like $2 million. They said one of the DEA agents had said that. So it really showed me the illicit nature of what's going on in this epidemic. And yeah, it was shocking to see that stuff.
It was frustrating. We entered episode 4 of the series. It was called Tunnel of Hope. And I was frustrated at this point for Dan and his journey and his mission, because none of the agencies, the DEA and the rest of the law enforcement, still seemed like they were kind of ignoring him. But finally, that one DEA agent, it was a woman that testified that if it wasn't for Dan's efforts, they would have never broke it open like they did.
Mm.
I also heard, as a follow-up, not in this, not in the series or the movies, I did some research, and there was another article, I think it was Wall Street Journal, that talked about the Pharmacist, that mentioned that because of what Dan did, it actually accelerated other regions of the country to hammer down on physicians that were purposely
Mm.
prescribing, and also known as what they call a pill mill. Uh,
Right, right.
but I want to ask a question to you, that just to see what you think of this. But during the height of this, and I would have said this is the height of this epidemic, would have probably been 7 to 8 years ago, maybe a little longer. But do you think that Purdue, based on not necessarily Purdue itself, but maybe the regional reps or maybe the territory guys, do you think that they would purposely target communities that were in plight, that were um, poor areas, and targeting physicians that were close by those communities to accelerate the whole ecosystem of what it became? Do you think that certain areas were targeted on purpose?
That's a good question. I don't see why not. I mean, I very well could see that. Looking at history, the government has done stuff like that before. Targeting certain communities for their own gain and pleasure. So I don't see why that very well could be the case, because when we have certain communities in that plight, we have a lot of factors that go into the perpetuation and the generational uh, plights that can happen generationally, and we saw that in the community. We had people who were struggling with addiction, and then it was going down to the kids and things of that nature. So as far as targeting poor communities, I could definitely see that.
Yeah. So when we look up some statistics, the top 10 cities with the most heroin use, number one is Omaha, Nebraska. I would have never in a
Wow.
million guessed that.
Wow.
And then it goes Indianapolis, Columbus, Ohio, Nashville, Tennessee, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Minneapolis, Kansas City, Memphis, and Wichita. Once again, New York City, Los Angeles, Miami, not even mentioned in there. And
Wow.
once again, that makes me think, are those areas targeted because they're rural and they're um, less million and billionaires that live there?
Mm.
And when you target areas like this, it's easier to grip onto people that are down and out and are having a hard time making a living. And you start injecting um, Oxycontin, the 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 pills, the heroin into those communities. You know, I don't mean to be nefarious in mind, but I honestly think that communities are definitely targeted, and I think there are pockets of the United States, West Virginia being one of the highest. I think it's the top three highest drug overdoses for opioids in West Virginia, and that isn't, those areas of those deaths are not, the demographics are very low income families.
Mm. Yeah, I mean and they also talked about in the documentary the 80s epidemic with the crack, and the government was definitely had a play in introducing that in certain communities. And you're definitely right as far as targeting certain communities with drug supply, that very well may be the case.
So I if you haven't seen the movie yet and you've listened to this, we just ruined it for you. But if for by some reason you still want to go back and watch it, I highly recommend it. I give it a 5 out of 5 stars. It was amazing. Um, I've reached out to Dan, who's known as the Pharmacist, with a thank you letter I sent to the pharmacist that was mentioned, the pharmacy that was mentioned there. I'm not sure if they ever got it, but I think he was brave in what he did. He ended up looking back into his community. He started counseling patients that kept coming into the pharmacy to get to the point that he became kind of there were complaints about him being kind of intrusive, but he became obsessed because he didn't want another parent to experience
Right.
the death of a child the way that he did. And kudos to Dan. Every pharmacist should have some level, community pharmacists have some level of the spidey sense when they know that these prescriptions are coming in. Now we're empowered by the Dan type pharmacist to pick up the phone and start questioning the physician. There's no reason, no matter if you get yelled at, no reason, if your spidey sense kind of tingles and you think something's up, make a call to the physician. And if their ego is hurt, too bad. It's you took an oath. You pharmacists took an oath to keep the community safe, and therefore you have every right to make that phone call.
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring that up, because in the documentary there was some contention between Dan and his boss.
Right.
And there was, as a pharmacist, we have corresponding responsibility, right? So if we knowingly fill an illegitimate script, we can get in trouble with the doctor. And it's funny because a red flag came up because all these pill mill prescriptions, because I think over 90% of prescriptions that came into Bradley's pharmacy were from Dr. Cleggett.
Right.
So all the same 3 drugs, the same dosages, not taking into account different patient variabilities, because not everyone responds to the same dose. And that's definitely a red flag because all these scripts are coming in the same from the same doctor, and that's you know, nefarious for pill mill doctors. That's what they would do. They would write the same script for the same dosages for everyone.
All right. Well,
And
I
then
enjoyed this time with you. I would like to invite you to do some more of these because, like I said, the content that you do is absolutely awesome. We got to get some more of your content out. We have 78,000 listeners on our network now. They should be listening to you and what some of the things that you have to say. So, Pharmacy Podcast Network, expect to hear more from William Amarquaye, Dr. Amarquaye, in the future. And I appreciate you coming on and doing this with me.
yeah, man, I definitely want to come back and talk some more about it. I thought there was some potential biases within the documentary, but yeah, we definitely have to come back and talk about some of those. But I'm definitely grateful for you having me on here to talk about this documentary.
Thank you so much. We will be hearing from you soon for sure.
All right.
All right. Take care.
Take care.